All right, ready to get going here. We've got Larry Adams presenting on the 10 years of Cacti and the evolution of plugins. Larry's vice president of the Cacti group and one of the primary developers for the open source project called Cacti. He currently works at Platform Computing as a senior consultant. And we'll have about 10 minutes at the end for Q&A, and I'll pass around the microphone so we can get it on the recording too. So, without further ado.
Thank you very much. So as mentioned, my name is Larry Adams. I'm with the Cacti Group, vice president, and otherwise chief bottle washer. If you ever watch SVN, you realize that this vice president actually does the coding, much like Ethan Gulstad, right? So, I'm thinking that I don't want to lean over. I just want to take this thing like a rock star. Not okay. Well, anyway, so the way I run these meetings, it's basically unscripted. I did a little bit of thinking before we did this, so hopefully you'll enjoy it. Hopefully you'll have questions. If there's something you really want to know about and it's burning, raise a hand. But generally, I'm going to rip through this stuff. I'll go at whatever speed's good for you guys, okay? It's a small enough team, small enough group where I can do that, okay? So the purpose of this meeting, really, the agenda is what is Cacti? And just sign of hands real quick, who doesn't know what Cacti is and what it does, besides the smart Alex in the front of the room here that happen to be members of the Cacti group. So we actually have two additional members of the Cacti group here today, and you may or may not have noticed them. They're wearing the same shirt. This is the Cacti group shirt, and with the cacti on it. And that's Jimmy Connor and Tony Roman sitting up front here. So we're a loose-knit group. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Cacti and what it is and what it does. And then we're going to talk about the origins of Cacti, where it came from. Okay? So this presentation is going to be color canvassing of plugins and things that Cacti does that you may or may not know about. You may be just using Cacti for what it does best. Then we're going to talk about the classic network operations model. And from that, we're going to extend that discussion into the plugin architecture and what it can do for you. After that, we're going to talk about useful plugins by example, in which case I'm just going to start showing you pictures and explaining how the plugins work, what they do for you, what they may not do for you. It depends on what I decide to talk about, being that this is unscripted, okay? And I think I'm going to hold this thing just a little further away so the video doesn't sound so bad in the end. And then the current state of Cacti, where are we at? And then the future of Cacti. Okay, without further ado, let's talk about what is Cacti. Well, this is actually from the Cacti website. It's a complete RD tool front end, okay? So when it started out, it was all about RD tool, MRTG, okay? It stores all of the necessary information to create graphs in MySQL. The front end is essentially PHP, which I was glad to see that Ethan's moving a lot of his stuff to the LAMP stack, which makes me really good because I see way too much Tomcat. Do not like Tomcat. Speaking as a developer, of course. Along with being able to maintain graphs, data sources, and round-robin archives in a database, Cacti handles all the gathering. So we have a polar infrastructure. This is all solicited data. There's not much unsolicited, but you'll see some very interesting things as we move along here. Certainly there's not enough time to cover everything. When I do Cacti training, I'm usually 5 days a week, solid. There's also SNMP support for those to use traffic graphs, for example, right? Pretty typical thing. Graphs, you say, well, everyone's seen RD tool graphs, and these are the kind of things that you can do in RD tool, right? Really beautiful. A picture tells 1,000 words. And performance monitoring and trending, really, really, for the people who know the stuff that they maintain, tell them that there's something going on. You take a look at a graph today, and then you go look at it tomorrow, and compare it to 30 other graphs, you can see things, patterns start to emerge to the trained eye. And from that, you can draw associations that, the $1 million event management and correlation systems can't do for you. So performance monitoring, it's a favorite subject of mine. It's my hobby. It's cool. Okay, so let's talk about where Cacti came from. Well, our founder, Ian Barry, was in high school just around 2001, and he was looking for something to do. And so he started Cacti. I don't know if it was a senior project, science fair, but he seemed to get a lot of press for it in Pennsylvania when he came out with it. It was published as a free application on the rdtool.org website, and that's how I found it. I was working at General Motors at the time, and in General Motors, I'd gone from a business entity to operations, and the first thing I asked the managers was, "Oh, it's great to be in operations. I'm glad to be here. What kind of budget do we have?" Now, budget, you say? Operations has no budget. We practice the engineer's creed, right? The engineer's creed is, I've done so much for so long with so little that I can do virtually anything with practically nothing, okay? So take that one with you as just the quote of the day. If you didn't already know it, you should know it now. And being that I'm an engineer, it was really close to my heart. So I found it, discovered it thanks to Toby and Toby Oticker and his website, and started playing around with it. It wasn't quite what it needed to be back in 2002, but it had promise because it was available on the web. You could do everything from the web. You didn't have to blank with the command line, which back then I was a GUI guy. I started doing Windows in, about 1984, right, with a very early version of Windows, and so I was a big Windows fan. Well, I was. Well, anyway, moving on. It was discovered by many in search for replacement for you name it, right? In my case, it was Nothing and Dying by MRTG, okay? That was it. And between 2002, when I discovered it, and 2004, there was many Incuberry releases. And I'm going to show you a couple of pictures here. This is nostalgic stuff. You can actually get this from the Cacti website, but I figured, he asked me to talk, I'll just talk about it, right? So here we go. So widespread global use, began in around 2004 with the release of 086, which was my first release of Cacti. So Cacti's been kind of a cool thing, for about 8 years. And again, in its infancy years ago. So who is the Cacti group? Well, it keeps growing. So for the people you may have, if you're users of Cacti and you've talked to people on the forums, here they are. So on the left we have Brawny Braun. He's from Germany. Andreas Braun, Gandalf, who's eclipsed me in post counts, some 2 years ago, and I don't think I want to catch up at this point. Again from Germany. We have Tony Roman, who's our fearless leader. Really, I mean, he's his official title is secretary, but but he's really the true leader of the team. And behind there is the old guy. I don't think I'm the oldest guy in the team, but the old guys are in the back. And then right to my left is a guy by the name of Jeff Pasnick. He really likes Irish pubs and alcohol. Okay, he's an ex-military. Actually, he's still in the Guard, the Canadian Guard, no less. He lives up in Regina, Saskatchewan, and he is our comedic relief. Right? If you ever wanted to go and be really, really, really offended and then have to laugh at yourself for after having that being done to you, this is the guy you want to talk to. And to his left and in front is Ian Barry, the founder. And, great guy. And an entrepreneur like you've never seen. They're doing some incredible things that I could spend a whole hour talking just about that. But since we only have an hour, to the left we have BSOD 2600, who will remain unnameless, but rather nameless. And just he's a good guy. He's our lone remaining Windows guy on the team because I've kind of ditched Windows. Okay, so and then we have Sigamit, who's with us here today, Jimmy Connor, and he's the guy who invented the plugin architecture. So some early screenshots with a little expletive there on the end. So this is a version of Cacti. How many people use this version of Cacti? Yeah, me too. I think I can't remember. Okay, let's take a look at another one. How about that? It looks a little different. Still doesn't look quite like Cacti. And here's another, kind of starting to look like Cacti, right? We got a console, we've got graphs, we got this thing docs, which I have no idea what that does. And the graphs were actually looking pretty good back then, right? You look at some of these graphs and you say to yourself, wow, that tells me a lot of information. And to management, they're like, oh, it's great. Looks like mountains, colorful. Yeah, I'm going to get promotion out of this. Okay, so we all know what it's about, right? But it's looking kind of like Cacti. We got the graphs. We got stuff over on the right. It's pretty cool. And, here's something where the body of the cacti is actually starting to take shape, right? Nothing's changed. Holy crap. And, and I was told once, I want to skin it, man. I want to do all this stuff. And they're like, we don't care about skins. We care about the data, right? So, but, we're really close now. And then this actually is 8 years old. And the one thing I want to let you know is that Ian did this, and I want someone to tell me the big difference between this image and this image. It has nothing to do with it's in the middle of the page. So Ian discovered something, right? What browser is this? Okay. What browser is this, and what operating system do you think that might be? Right? I think he got bitten by the Linux bug. Absolutely. That's a Red Hat in the corner. I still like Red Hat. I love Red Hat. I mean, they got a good distribution. It's been forked a bunch of times. And they've stayed true to the open source. They've made it as difficult as possible because they're in the business to make money. But at the same time, it's an open operating system. So there's my screenshots. So with that said, the one thing I can tell you about these is there's only 2 tabs. It's all about graphs. It's all about graphs. And that's all it does. And back in 2004, I told Ian, well, I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to do all these things. And Ian's like, it's performance monitoring. Okay, nothing more. So let's talk about the classic operations model. Okay, this is the networking team's solution to overheating in the data center. All those darn servers. Oh, we got a problem. We got a fix for that. This is actually what the UAW does when you piss them off. You come in on a Monday, and that's what you get. So this is one of my famous discoveries. I just hope it's not copyrighted or anything, but this is awesome. This is worth its weight in gold. But really, the classic operations model, what is it? It's FCAPS, right? Everyone here know FCAPS, right? Do we know FCAPS? FCAPS? Interesting thing, real old. FCAPS is the ISO Telecommunications Management Network Model and Framework for Network Management. Wow. Really, what does that mean? Well, let's take it this way. F, fault management, Nagios. That's what Nagios does. C, configuration management. What changed and when? Who do I go after for that router going into an infinite reboot loop, right? Counting management. I need to bill 95th percentile if you're an ISP, or how much power did you draw, or whatever. How many rack positions are you taking? How many amps are you drawing, right? You set up this thing, accounting management. And then we have this thing called performance management, right? What's going on? How's things trending? Am I running out of T1s? Do I need a DS3? Do I need an OC 768? Whatever the heck that is, right? And then finally, security management, one of my least favorite subjects, which Tony up in here on the left would attest to, right? In other words, who's using it, what, and did they use it properly, okay? So that's FCAPS. So what FCAPS is the basis of is basically running operations. If you're a NOC, you follow FCAPS or some variant thereof. I like FCAPS because it sounds cool, frankly. But what does Cacti do? Well, out of the box, performance management, right? Graphs, 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 more graphs. Okay? But then came along this guy by the name of Jimmy Connor who came up with this thing. In fact, I remember I was at GM. I'd written this plugin called MacTrack because I was just tired of not knowing what the hell was going on the network because I was kind of responsible for it. And, being a good manager, I didn't want to do management. Wait a minute, hold on, did I say that right? But anyway, I developed this thing called MacTrack, and I throw it up on the Cacti forums, and immediately, people are just like, gotta have it, gotta have it, gotta have it. And then I get a call from this guy out of the blue. I don't remember how he got me a number. Maybe it was like we talked to each other on the forums. I think that's how it started. And he says, I can change that into a plugin in 30 minutes. I didn't know that he'd already done it, right? He said, send me the source code. I'm like, you can't do it in 30 minutes. By the way, what in the hell is the plugin architecture anyway? He's like, no, you're going to collect this. So he actually did it. And then I was like, oh, this is cool. And it was, for me, for a geek like me, techie, right? Although I think, I can kind of talk sometimes. You just don't get me to talk too long because you get really bored because, well, for number one, I don't stop long enough for you to ask any questions, which, by the way, hopefully this is entertaining enough where you don't have to until the end. But the Cacti plugin architecture is a development framework that allows Cacti functionality to be extended. In other words, you can start penetrating into FCAPs, right? Cacti is a real good framework for that. It was derived from the Squirrel Mail project, and its original author, Jimmy Connor, right up here, created it so that Cacti could be extended beyond just performance management. You'll see a little bit of that today. We're going to give you the color canvassing I talked about. It's implemented through a series of hooks within the Cacti core code. So essentially what we do is we put places in the code where you can take over and do things with objects. All right? So it takes a little bit to get used to, like anything. But once you're used to it, Cacti can do just about anything. Okay? Each plugin can use any of these hooks. So if you have a hook that wants to intercept, say, a device save operation, you can have 6 or 7 plugins all contributing to that activity. Okay, it's not limited to just one. There's a few cases where that's not the case, but those hooks will generally be deprecated, and they were done for various reasons, but that's not really a topic of what we're here to talk about today. So the next section of the presentation is public domain plugin examples, and if you go to the Cacti website, or you're smart enough and you know about SVN, you'll see if you go into the plugin repository that's maintained at the Cacti Group website, we're up to 34 plugins now that sit in the Cacti repository. In the public domain, there's over 60. And we're not talking just about plugins that monitor some thing, and I'm not talking derogatory against Nagios, really, seriously. But some of these plugins are whole applications that reside or sit on top of Cacti. Okay? So it's pretty substantial. So let's talk about the my pride and joy. Oh, sorry, wrong slide. Okay, so again, this is what happens when you unscript and you start talking before you flip the page. Here are some of the more popular plugins, and I'm just going to explain to you what each of these do, right? And hopefully it's not too boring. So Boost is Cacti's answer to RD tool caching. So it essentially replicates RD tool cache. It was born in the fall of 2007 when Toby, Ian, Tony, Matt Massey, everybody, including Ethan, showed up at Linux World. There is a company called Groundworks, and they put together a forum, and the Cacti group was there. And we had a birds of a feather conversation. Everyone was complaining about RD tool, about the problems it had with I/O. And the gentleman by the name of Philippe Simonet spoke up and said, well, I just do batch inserts. And everyone's like, oh, really? Such a simple thing. So that's what Boost does. It basically does on-demand updating. If you've got a lot of people that are viewing your website, it creates the image once and then caches it for the lifetime of the graph. So basically, it reduces out of the box. If you're doing bulk updates, your RDs once an hour, it reduces your I/O by a factor of, by 12, right? And then it goes beyond there. Some people go as high as 4 to 6 hours before they actually do these bulk RD tool updates. It really depends on how much system you throw at it. And Tony will be talking tomorrow about performance tuning in Cacti, and we'll cite a couple examples that are pretty substantial. I don't want to steal his thunder, so. T-Hold is the thresholding and alarming plugin for Cacti. It not only does some of the things that Nagios does, but it sends out nice emails with graphs attached. It does restore alarms. It talks about down hosts down services if that's what you happen to be graphing, and literally any graph that you have in Cacti that can tell a story that you can translate into an RPN expression mathematically against any of the data sources, or simply want it if the disk goes above 90%, I want to know, right? And there was a question in the performance tuning section about, well, what about rate of change alarms? Well, there's a thing in T-Hold called baseline alarming, where you set a threshold that if in a day utilization of a volume goes up by more than X percent, I want an alarm. So we have that capability today in Cacti. MacTrack, again, my first plugin, is all about IP MAC tracking. It's the security persons and the network administrators, not really an ISP tool, but if you're say you manage the access layer and you want to know where somebody happens to be sitting. The joke I use is there was someone I really disliked at GM, okay, and I could always track her what conference room she was sitting in and what building she was in. It was no, it's not. It wasn't predatory. I'm really kidding. I sometimes I just can't believe myself. But basically, it goes out and it does the MAC to IP association. It pins the MAC addresses to a port and then gives you nice color canvassing. Plus, you get additional reports, and I'll show you enough screenshots of that. So that was my first plugin. Again, real popular. It's been pretty much the same plugin for a couple years now, since I've been out of the network space since about 2006. Weather maps. This thing is really cool, written by a guy by the name of Howard Jones over in the UK. And it basically, you can take anything, any image, and draw a network map. He provides an image editor, and you draw that editor, and then you plop it into Cacti, and you get dynamic graphs. You can see utilization of the backbone, all from just a single picture. So it's a really nice tool. We see in a lot of tools about network discovery. We're going to do the topology and all that, but really nothing beats a good weather map, and I'll show you what that means. And these are just a few examples. Go to Google, search on weather map, site cacti.net, and you'll flip, right? Superlinks allows Cacti to be extended. So let's say you're using Remedy and you want to be able to have a single click into Remedy from Cacti. You can do that with Superlinks. Say you want to put your out-of-band management, your rack logins into Cacti as a menu pick or something like that. You can do that very easily. Nectar is the next one, and this is all about emailing reports, right? Say you have your top 20 graphs, and a manager says, I want that graph once a week to my email. I don't trust you guys in operations. I got to see it for myself. You can do that in Nectar. You can create as many reports as you want, take as many Cacti graphs as you want, stuff them into those reports, and stuff them right down the email boxes of all the managers that you'd love to talk about. Being a former manager, it would bring me great pleasure if you would just send me a couple of those as well. Real time is it takes, Cacti does 5-minute polling by default. But say you're in an incident, you're watching something, you need to see that graph updated every 5 seconds, right? If you're net SNMP and you're looking at traffic, 15 seconds is as best as you get, because if you do it more frequently than 15 seconds, you get the same data twice. But it allows you to go down to, right now, 5-second granularity on any graph in Cacti. Okay, goes back, it does the polling, it does all the collecting, and it's pretty cool. My famous last words. Syslog is another good plugin, because with Syslog, you can take your syslogs and you can do alarming. So let's say, for example, you have a hard drive go down, you need an alarm, right? You get a smart check failure, you get somebody trying to do a brute force attack, and you're getting a bunch of root login attempts or something like that. You want to track that down. Syslog will watch those logs, send out alarm notifications. Okay, and there's a lot of options. It's a pretty cool plugin. It's if you're into traps, you basically install an SNMP TT, and now I've got all my traps coming into Syslog as well. So you can do notification on incidents like leak down, things of that nature from your switches or routers. HMIB is another plugin that does host resources MIB. So if any of you guys are familiar with SNMP, you know that just about every agent on the planet, even AIX, I heard like $600,000 figures thrown at the kickoff this morning, provides host resources MIB. Tells you about all the processes on the system, how much memory they're using, what software is installed, when it was installed, right? So it's pretty cool. Nice plugin. Config Manager is all about backing up your routers, comparing configurations. Discovery, basically you point it at one-to-many subnets, give it a pool of community read stings, and it will find those devices and add them to Cacti, even discover what template to associate them with, the whole thing. Monitor. Monitor is a plugin that just gives you a dashboard. Shows you the status of your hosts, and it's colorful. You go to a lot of NOCs and you'll see Monitor up on the screen so they can see. They have maybe their critical hosts on Monitor, and it's colored by the status of the hosts and so forth. Automate, written by Reinhard Scheck, is a cool plugin. Basically, what you do when you get a Cacti installation, you take Monitor, which sets up rules. Like, for this type of device, I want to graph the up interfaces. I want them to be 64-bit graphs. I want the CPU. I want the fabric utilization. I want, if it's a server, I want to track this one process, right? If it's, that's about it. It just graphs things. So literally out in the Cacti community, there's probably in excess of 1,000 templates written by God knows who. Most of them some pretty good people that graph things. And Automate sets up a set of rules for you where you actually control what happens when that device shows up in Cacti. And not only will it do that, but it'll place it onto a graph tree, so it'll organize the graphs such that in the traditional Cacti interface you can actually get to the data. So, with that said, I've got one more here, but who thinks that Cacti's moved beyond FCAPs? I do, right? So it's pretty scary stuff. So Report It is your TopX report generator. Basically, what were my top routers in terms of CPU utilization? What were my top routers in terms of network bandwidth consumption? Which hosts use the most memory? Anything that you want reported in that sense can be done through the Report It plugin. Okay? And this is just a sampling. Right? There are lots and lots and lots of other plugins that do really, really cool things. And this is all out in the wild, as I like to refer to it. So, now that you know a little bit about plugins, let's look at some screenshots that have been neuralized here. In other words, some of the information has been removed to protect the innocent, right? So here's an image of the T-Hold plugin, and you can see it already here on the interface that I no longer have just two tabs, right? I've got a sea of tabs. I refer to them as tombstones because they've been there too long, okay? It just drives me nuts. So here you have all your thresholds. Here's the status of the thresholds. We have one here that's disabled. And what happens when you get a T-Hold, right? You get an email, right? Real good for small companies, right? Where, you may be reactive and you're maybe just kind of maturing on that CMMI model where everything's done for you and you go to work, George Jetson, push a button, I'm here, and that happened to be the time clock, right? So, anyway, so it gives you a URL back to Cacti so you can see what happened that generated the alarm, right from your BlackBerry or we all use Android, iPhones, sorry, Tony, and Androids. Yes, that's mine. This is Android, rooted. Yeah, true geek. So that's T-Hold, really cool, right? And if I overuse the word cool, someone throw something at me. Here's MacTrack. MacTrack is kind of like T-Hold. We've adopted this interface here where you have, and you can see there's a different number of tabs here because there's not as many plugins installed. But we have what we refer to as a sub-tab interface. So on the first tab is generally the most summarized information. Here we see a number of sites that have network switches, and you can see how many switches are at that site, and you have this concept of drill downs on the left-hand side here. So we've kind of adopted this strategy to give a kind of a consistent look and feel to Cacti. this blue button will go out and do an immediate scan of that site to see where all the MAC addresses are. Right? An administrator comes in and says, I got to find something now. I'm only running MacTrack every 30 minutes. Click that button. It'll go out and scan the whole site. Update all the associations. You go out and find that virus there, Johnson. Right? Go disable that port. So the drill down continues with MacTrack. Here we're looking at the devices in a kind of a summary view where we see that at this site we have all these sites. Here's all the devices. We have a bunch of Cisco equipment. How many switches? How many active IPs there are? How many ports and so forth? So basically, it's tabular reporting. All right. Again, with all the drill downs. Here's another with IP ranges. It shows us how many whether it's a CIDR block or not, it's a Class C as far as I'm concerned, just because I didn't have enough time to actually do the rest of it. So I don't, the hell with it. Everything's a Class C. 10 dot, it's a Class C. No, don't think of it like a Class A network. It's really Class C. Just pretend. And it shows you how many IPs it saw on that and what the peak number was and when it happened. So just general reporting that if the manager comes to you and says, how's our IP utilization, you're like, oh, no problem. When did the peak occur? No problem. Yeah, we had a bunch of vendors in town. Yeah, they were in like all their laptops in the conference rooms, whatever. Okay? Again, with all the drill downs. Then we have the IP interface, and this is where we actually can do the forensics. Say you get a call or you get an alarm and you need to find out what port and what site this particular user is, so you can maybe disable a port, dispatch someone to go fix the laptop. MacTrack also does, the laptop was reported stolen. You put a alarm in MacTrack and say, if that Mac shows up on the network, I need a ticket right now, right? We'll dispatch security. It's usually, where I came from, it was all UAW, right? So it was all, the UAW, that laptop disappeared and went right into the UAW shop. Right? Not to say I don't love the UAW. I'm a big labor person, okay? So how it can be conservative and pro-labor at the same time, I don't know. All right, moving on. All your network interfaces. Utilization, error counts, errors accumulating, when it was last changed, sort by bandwidth consumptions, rescan it on the fly, go to the graphs, okay? You literally can drill down from any interface to all the graphs that happen to exist, whether it be, utilization, errors, discards. You can go in here, see, okay, show me all the interfaces that are accumulating errors, and let me look at the graphs and see how long that's been happening. Wow, that's performance management. So it's pretty cool, right? Let me see. Oh, yeah. So that's MacTrack, and that's just a little bit of what it does, right? This is a color canvassing of plugins. So weather map. Here is a weather map, and you basically see this is an example that I pulled from the Cacti website. Probably not the most dynamic model, but you can see the links between the sites, their utilization. If you hover over any of those lines, you actually get to see the Cacti graph. If you click then on the Cacti graph, it takes you right into Cacti. So I saw this thing a few years ago, and then I actually worked with a guy at State of Connecticut, and we did a go-to meeting, and he showed me what he did with weather maps, and he basically had what looked like a CAD drawing for every site that they managed. And on that CAD drawing was the circuit IDs, the phone numbers for the vendor, the account exec at the ISP who he would call if he couldn't get an answer to the question, and the weather map. It was incredible. It was incredible. Their operations team had one place to go to do any incident management. It started in Cacti. And when I saw that, I was flipped out that you could do so much with Cacti with simply by using Howard Jones' weather map tool. Really, it's a phenomenal plugin. And, his PHP coding isn't too well from a syntactical standpoint, but he writes really good code. Here's another weather map example that basically shows a switch, shows the temperature of various hard drives using the DS Stats plugin from Cacti. DS Stats plugin actually takes all of the things that you're measuring and puts it into a database so you can do queries. So if you wanted to say, what's the average CPU utilization for a site, you simply query DSStats knowing what the data template is or the group of data sources and having some meta associated with your sites. And you can literally build graphs in Cacti that show aggregate information without having to use the aggregate plugin, which is a great plugin in and of itself. Okay, so this one here just shows current status of looks like a data domain, some sort of NAS device. Here's one for our Visio users in the room, right? This, if you're a Visio user, this would look very familiar to you, showing a firewall, a couple networks. Again, this is a very dynamic map. You go into here, you hover over something, and you see data. And it doesn't have to be just network data, right? You could show temperature, transaction rates, something that comes off the firewall that you think is important, right? Although it's most popular for network traffic monitoring. So here's a NECDAR report, and this is what I do. This is actually cluster utilization for an LSF cluster for one of our customers, and this is a daily report that goes to all the managers that shows how well the cluster is being utilized. And we see graphs like slot utilization here, right? This cluster is pretty heavily used. Job throughput, load average, CPU utilization, capacity of the cluster, memory across the cluster. All sorts of interesting graphs, but they get the Nectar report. What's so good about it is you get these reports, they're hyperlinked back to Cacti. So, if you're interested in finding out what's going on, once a day and you're tired of logging into the same old thing, but you're very interested because your customers pay you to be interested in it, you can get it through email with Cacti. Here's a real-time plugin. I've just taken a couple examples here, some really silly stuff. I'm doing 15-second graphs of network traffic and CPU utilization on a single host. This is small Cacti install, actually using looks like Firefox there. But that's essentially what real-time does. You pick a couple graphs, you click the little real-time icon that's to the right of the graph here, and one of these guys pop up. Okay? So, pretty cool. Here's the syslog plugin. Syslog plugin is designed, the biggest networks I've got it on are somewhere on the order of 600 hosts, and syslog can process roughly about 4 million syslog records every 5 minutes. Okay? And generate alarms like on this one here. You can't see it here, but there's some rather old hardware that I like to demo because we have smart hard drive failures that have been pending for the last few years. But if you do the demo every 30 minutes, you get to show them that and say, I can generate an alarm on that and open a ticket even automatically and have the hardware vendor dispatched or get the order processed. So it becomes it's a very interesting tool. Plus, it gives you the ability to do just general forensics, like sort by date, or just show me the error messages or alarms. So you can pick the various levels. The filtering is quite exceptional. It also supports MySQL partitioning, so that if you get lots and lots of syslog, the system just keeps running. All right, you don't have to worry about that old data; it just gets dumped or saved as long as you want. As long as you don't go back querying 3 months, you're okay. Or in some cases, at some security firms, more than a day, right? Because they're getting gigabytes of syslog every day. This is HMIB. Again, taking the same approach as I mentioned before with the whole concept of drill down. And here we can see by operating system the number of up hosts, the versions, the number of login sessions, the utilization. So it becomes like a mini dashboard. And if you guys can imagine already, I'm into tables for some reason. So everything's a table. And then we see down on the bottom, which is really the part that people love, is CPU memory utilization, how many are running of a particular process. So a customer that I wrote something similar for this, he looked at the interface one time, and this guy was running a cluster of about 500 nodes. And he said, "Can I kill that process? I need to kill that process right now." First time he looked at it, he's like, I got to kill that. I got to kill that process because I tell you what, right now I'm having a bad day if that process doesn't get killed real soon. I mean, literally. I mean, to the trained eye again, having this information is really, really important. And what's more, because we have all these graphs of application utilization, although it's not, Nagios is still applicable here, right? Because I'm not doing, 1 minute polling's good, 5-second polling is bad, right, for a cacti. But, if you're willing to live with 5 minutes, you can place a threshold on any of these graphs and send out an alarm with T-hold saying such and such application has gone off the range again, and open a ticket, do whatever you need to do. All right, so it's pretty cool. There I go with that cool word again. And again, we've built a sub-tab interface, so you can drill into the devices themselves and look at their utilization, so it's dashboarding. You can then drill from there to the graphs for the device. You can do storage. You can look at hard disks. I got a request from Tony yesterday to make this have the process dashboard be interchangeable with disk utilization dashboard, because maybe you don't care about the processes, you care about how much disk is in use on these servers. So we don't. There's a couple plugins that have not really been ever announced, right? So at least you don't find them on the Cacti website, but I thought I would show you a couple of other things that I've done and others have done, again, by example. So this is the plugin called Scanner. It's an ISP network management tool. It's used by a fairly major ISP here in the States. This is a summary dashboard that shows by city, state, and region how many devices are up, how many devices have errors, what the average and maximum CPU utilization are, what the fabric utilization is. In fact, they can add as many metrics that they're graphing onto this dashboard as they want, and do all the color coding, the stoplight charts that management wants. It's all dynamic. In fact, they never go into the console and add graphs. Everything, they don't have to touch anything. They just plop a device into their CMDB. It appears in Cacti. They can view all the interfaces. They get all the graphs. Everything just kind of appears. Pretty cool. Down below, we see interface utilization. You can see, we've got the max in on a packet over SONET of 1.78 gigabytes per second, right? So, yeah, they're moving. This ISP moves a DVD a second on their backbone. And you can see some color coding here, error counts in the various regions, to be unnamed. So we have, again, this is pretty boring, right, because I had to take out all the real interesting stuff. But it's, again, the same interface. We have a drill down. We have a city, state, and region, the device type, the host name, the DNS matching, when it was, how long it's been up, how many interfaces are on it, how many interfaces are used, the last update, how long it took for Cacti to actually collect the information. And again, we have a little green button here. If you need it, like right now, I click that button, it goes off, it updates all the statistics for the device. We go into the interfaces. This ISP on this system has close to 100,000 interfaces, and they get these interfaces updated every 30 minutes. They get network utilization, bytes in, bytes out on average. They get errors accumulating. They can see whether or not the device is accumulating errors, where it happens to be, look for trends, rescan the device, view the graphs on demand. They can come in here, do complex queries, find an interface. They can say, if they're a project manager and they need to find out, all those interfaces are supposed to have aliases on them. They actually let their project people into here so that they can do audits to verify that the equipment's all compliant. And this is from one tool. How we doing? Okay. Is it time? 10 minutes. Dang. I talk too much. All right. So I'm going to put this thing down and skip ahead. Is that okay? All right. So everything you want from here. Here's more scanner, more scanner. You'll get this electronically. So, if you have any questions, again, the Cacti people here in the room. So I've written a couple holy grails. The first one is RTM. RTM is a package in Cacti. This doesn't quite look like Cacti. It's very dynamic, and it's all about HPC clusters. So if you're running SudGrid Engine, you're making a mistake. It may be saving you a bit of money, or if you're running PBS Pro, or you're running, I don't know, Condor, right? So I got to make a living. This is how I make a living. So back in 2006, I wrote MacTrack, and then I thought that was good, and then some science project came out, and in came RTM, which is for operations people. If I can quote one of our customers, right? In this tool called RTM, it's my blanket now. In this tool called RTM, I learned more about the operation of my global clusters in one day than I had learned in 5 years. Literally because of the information that shows up in here about, this HPC environment. So I can scroll through, but cluster dashboards, host dashboards. If you're a user of Monitor, you're probably a little familiar because this is based on Jimmy's work. Job details, including exceptions. You can look at all sorts of interesting things. You can do analytical charts showing utilization of the hosts. You can look at host details, load average, I/O paging. The whole thing is all there, dashboarded and available with drill downs, SSH to the clients, everything. Here is a customer. This is actually customer data. This is over 4,000 hosts in 4 continents. All the workload, all the utilization, efficiency of the workload on those hosts, I/O across those clusters at the host group level, at the job level, at the user level, project level. All these metrics are live, and it was all possible because of Cacti. So when I go back and I talk about Cacti being a framework and you can do anything with it, I'm dead serious. This thing is, the customers love it. This particular customer, we put in the RTM years ago, and I was working with the administrator for RTM at the time, or for Cacti at the time, and he went through and looked at the 800 users that logged into this system, and he saw the CEO and the CIO's names, and he freaked out. Because the kind of reporting you get from this, you got to imagine this is, you talk about sunken assets from this interface, we're talking $20 to $40 million, right? That's a good bit of budget. That's just a hardware. That's not even cooling, power. We're just talking about literally hardware in the data center. Largest RTM install, and I don't want to take away Tony's thunder, is over 15,000 hosts, right? All from one pane of glass, one Cacti. And Tony will tell you tomorrow about how you can scale Cacti that large. Here's another one that's FarmOn, and I'm running out of time. But this is a portal that you can literally resize. And again, if you were an HPC person, you would understand why this is important, right? Again, this is just the Cacti framework, all done in Cacti. This is the one where I showed it to the guy and I said, okay, here it is. This is how it works. He's like, I got to kill that process right now. This is everything about every process on every HPC node, whether it's associated with a job or if it's something rogue. It's all queryable and displayable here. Pretty cool stuff. And then process control on top of that if you find something that's bad. And the ability then to, because of the graphs, to do thresholding and alarming based upon trends, whether it be a rogue process taking too much memory, taking more CPU than it's supposed to. All that's available when you drop in T-Hold with this plugin. Okay, almost there. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to say, and then I think we'll have time for... So, by the way, I'm just going to say that the guys here before me were squatting on this territory, so I figure if we run a few minutes over, you won't kill me, right? All right, cool. All right, so Cacti Group is alive and well. You saw all of the live members. There's no dead ones yet. We're racing towards the finish line. None of us have passed it yet. And Cacti itself is alive and well. We just released on Sunday Cacti 087H. Some things that were included in there were we call lossless reindexing. Oftentimes in Cacti, when you reindex, you'll get a warning message in the log, gone. Polar performance increases, like 1/4 the polling time for, especially people on 1 minute polling. Additional template import options for people that, think they know how to use Cacti and then they screw things up and wish they had taken training. RD Tool 1.4 support. improve spine performance and per-host parallelization support. And that's a big one, right? If you're doing something that runs a lot of scripts as opposed to script server SNMP and really slows your cacti down, this will help out because we now can parallelize at the host level. So if you've got a host with 40,000 graphs and cacti can't complete because it's got 40,000 graphs and you only have one process doing each of those things, not serially, because, again, another discussion, the spine collector in cacti is hyper-parallelized, right? We can do bulk GET requests from SNMP. We can parallelize the collection at the host level. We can do multiple scripts running. It's nuts, okay? It's priceless, as they say. And, the last thing I'll say about the Cacti group is we all are employed. We all have full-time jobs, and we oftentimes complain when we maybe we're coding all day and then we go home to help you guys out with Cacti and code all night. But guess what? This is what I do. Development of the next version is near alpha quality. We had our annual Cacti group meeting. You saw the picture. It was last month before last. It was in August, actually. And we did approximately 200 commits. Now, we've been sitting on this version of Cacti for a long time. We haven't let go of the existing Cacti. We're supporting you guys. But the next version of Cacti is on the horizon. We provide site support, which is just metadata about objects. Internationalization, we already have 7 or 9 languages partially done. Multiple time zone support. So if you happen to be in a different time zone and you're looking at your data center and they told you couldn't have a Cacti server, but you wanted to see it in your time zone, no problem. Integrated plugin architecture, which has been a real bane for us for a long time. And large site performance improvements. Okay, and that is more about drop-downs in Cacti and really kind of the performance of the interface. There's certain areas of Cacti you don't want to go to if you've got like 10,000 hosts, right? And all that will be rectified. And it's already done. And we're heavy on the CSS and AJAX callback support. Here's a rather ugly picture, but it works. And so that's it. So I'll just take any questions at this point. I guess. How about some questions for Tony? No questions. I cannot believe it. Okay, so any of you excited about what you saw today? Anyone here? See a show of hands for people that saw something that they didn't really know existed in Cacti. Oh, yeah. All right. We need to do better on marketing. We got to talk to Ethan. It's a cool tool, and you're talking to, a guy that's done the most code commits, not necessarily because of what I added to Cacti, but because I'm paranoid. And, I commit often because it's my backup system. I was once told by a manager, it's not a question of if you'll ever lose data, it's a question of when. And the way my mind works, I don't remember what I did 10 minutes ago, let alone 2 weeks ago. So I do commit often, and again, a prolific plugin writer. So.
Do you guys support different audience in the UI based on like AD, LDAP, radius?
Well, yes. The answer is big time yes. We not only do we provide support for Web Basic, which is Uber anything you want it. If you've got single sign-on infrastructure, right? So you got SSO, You've got SSO, and you've got an Apache module for it, which all the vendors do. They're going to charge you for each server you put it on. You can do that, right? You can do Active Directory right out of the box. It's our LDAP module, okay? And if you're using Cacti 087G and above, there's a plugin called Domains that allows you to have 3 or 4 ADs and 2 or 5 LDAPs and call them differently, and users can log in from all of them, right? So, is that it? Answer your question? Cool. Anything else? Come on. I want more questions. I flew all this way to talk. All right. Thanks for coming.